I have not had one of these rock stars in like a year, but those of you who have been watching this channel for like 5 years at this point, which is probably approximately 0 people, you might know I used to get these rock stars all the time. Still holds up. Supercars, oftentimes seen as the pinnacle of beauty when it comes to automotive design, and in a lot of cases, a huge inspiration for us as car people. I'm sure a lot of us can relate to having a poster up in our room as a child of, you know, like a Lamborghini Countach or a Ferrari F40 or the Diary of a Wimpy Kid cover. Just me? Okay, cool. But some supercars do not have quite the same staying power when it comes to their aesthetics. Either they are not quite beautiful so much as striking, or they're not so much striking as they are just hard to look at because they're so ridiculously ugly. And we're going to talk about 10 specific examples today of the ugliest supercars ever. And number 1 is the Consuliere GTP. Now, a lot of people probably haven't even heard of this thing in the first place, but it's an interesting little car, and I think that it's honestly really cool in a sense. It's a very strange car that most people haven't heard of and certainly haven't seen. If you showed up to Cars and Coffee with one, people would probably want to be your friend for 48 seconds, and you know, that's impressive, I guess. That's longer than most friendships I maintain. Now, the only problem is it kind of looks like their design inspiration was like a depressed frog or something. The design is just not cohesive. It's like somehow weirdly round and boxy at the same time. There's like a weird amount of overhang for it being a supercar. It's just kind of strange to look at, and in all respects, kind of ugly, but you know, I kind of find weird and ugly cars strangely appealing, probably because I relate. So this is a car that I actually think is pretty cool, and it has an interesting story, being that it was designed by Mosler, who have gone on to make a lot of crazy race cars and whatnot. Let's get on into the next one. And the number 2 car on this list, which by the way, these are not in any sort of actual ranking, this is just a list. We're just going from 1 through 10, I guess. So the number 2 ugly supercar is, of course, the Gumpert Apollo. I just don't know what they were doing when they designed this car. It is a very strange looking car by all respects. There's some interesting angles on it. I don't know if that's a good thing. It kind of looks like it's constantly stoned, which is interesting. Maybe it's a Green Day fan, I don't know. But it's just generally not that attractive of a package when it comes to the aesthetics. Kind of weird looking. It's a very impressive car mechanically and from an engineering standpoint, but interestingly, Gumpert, who has then gone on to rebrand themselves as Apollo, has made some, albeit maybe overstyled, but still very beautiful supercars after the Apollo, like the Apollo Aero and the Apollo Intensa Emozione. Like, those are both really beautiful supercars that you would not guess followed the Gumpert Apollo, which is arguably not. The number 3 car on this list is the Lamborghini Centenario, which is just so weird looking. I don't understand it. Why did they make it look like it has braces? As a person who had braces, that's not good. It's just so overstyled. It's like they took the base Lamborghini car and then sent it to Hot Wheels, and then they made their own modifications to it, and then they sent it to like 2005 Need for Speed customization body kit era, and then got it back, and they were like, cool, we'll just put this on sale now. It's just so overdone and so weird looking. I respect it as a car, and I mean, for those of us who play like the Forza Horizon games, it's also been a really overpowered car on those games before in certain classes, so I have respect for it in that sort of way, which has no bearing on real life whatsoever. But it's just so weird looking, and I've never been able to gel with the appearance of it, so Lamborghini Centenario, it's ugly. And from one heavy hitter right into the next, the Lamborghini Veneno. The Lamborghini Veneno is just, I don't understand this car. You can tell that its design is very functional, but And I'm a person who finds beauty in function. I'd rather have a car that is very, very functional than very, very beautiful necessarily. And to me, function is beautiful. For instance, a car a lot of people commonly think is ugly, being the McLaren Senna, I actually think is a pretty cool and an overall good looking car, because you know it looks like that for a reason. The Lamborghini Veneno, it feels like it maybe could look better while accomplishing the same thing. It's just really strange. It kind of looks like it melted, and like the sharp frame that was underneath the exterior started poking through in a couple of spots. I don't know. It's just arguably not a very appealing looking car. And like the Centenario, but even more so, this was an incredibly, ridiculously expensive car when it was new. They only made a handful of these, I don't know the exact amount, but they were $4.5 million. And in my opinion, you could look better in most other supercars that have ever been made for like $100,000+ without having to dip your hand into $4.5 million territory for this designer's diarrhea that this car is. I'm being really harsh. Again, I don't like hate this car or anything, but I do think that it is arguably really not that good looking. And the number 5 car on the list is the Vector M12. Now, again, this is a car that maybe not everyone has heard of, but a lot of people have probably seen at some point the Vector W8, which is just one of the most ridiculous looking cars of all time, but it is so ridiculous, so 80s Blade Runner cocaine infused looking aesthetic that you just can't help but like it. It's so insane. Like, the Lamborghini Countach is already an absolutely absurd looking car, and it's like they took the Countach and then just like ramped it up by 100 times. The W8 is like a certified classic, just absurd supercar, and I honestly love how it looks. The M12 was intended to be the successor of the W8, and it had Lamborghini running gear, if I'm not mistaken, but it just did not capture the same aesthetic, or any aesthetic that really I think most people would want. It went full swing early 90s with just the really rounded aesthetic that kind of looks like they took like a Tic Tac and then squashed it into a car shape, like one of those weird pennies that you get at like not that interesting of a tourist destination. The proportions are just so weird. It's like they tried to do a few different things, like the inbuilt rear spoiler thing, like a Ferrari F40, but they did it less well. They tried to do the overall weird round aesthetic, like a lot of cars did in the 90s, and they just did it less well. It's an amalgamation of a lot of different ideas, as if 4 different people were all drawing a picture of this while describing what they were drawing to each other on the phone, and then they just layered all the pictures together and just sent that design in, and this is what you got. And just let me say, the only thing less cohesive than the sentence that I just said is the design of this car. Moving on. And the number 6 car on the list is, I've got to remember how to pronounce this, 110. And the number 6 car on the list is the Bugatti 110, which is not good. Performance, as usual with Bugatti, absolutely amazing. The engineering behind this car, absolutely amazing. I always have respect for the engineering of a car. That's why I haven't crashed my Mustang into a telephone pole yet, because I respect it too much. That joke didn't work there. But this car is just, it's not, it's really bad. I get what they were doing. They were trying to do like a modern version of the Bugatti EV110, and I guess they accomplished that, but that wouldn't have been my choice of car to replicate in the modern era. It's just so wildly overdone, and the proportions are just so weird. It's like, it looks like it has headlights that are scaled down to like 25% scale of what they should be, but then like the overall grille and like just the lower half of the front end is scaled up like 150 times. It's really ugly. I guess in a way they did a good job at making the EV110 into a modern car, But the problem with that is the number 7 car on this list is the Bugatti EB110 SS, which again is an amazing car. It's an icon. It is one of the all-time greats when it comes to retro supercars, but it is also absolutely hideous, all things considered. There are some parts of the car that look pretty decent overall, but the placement of like the graphics on the car being like the headlights and stuff like that, they just don't make any sense. If you took away the grill and like the grills and the lights and all of those things and you just had the overall shape of the car, it's not that bad. It's kind of general 80s, 90s wedge supercar looking shape, but then I just feel like every other design feature of the car was just placed in such an awkward way that the end result was, well, it was this, which then spawned this, which scares children and breaks up marriages because it's so hideous. And it's so hard because this whole list I know sounds incredibly negative because we're talking about how ugly these cars are, but genuinely, almost all of these cars are cars that I typically am a fan of and do like, but the designs are just not there. We can talk about how good the EB110 SS is as a car. Fantastic. But we don't have to lie to ourselves and pretend that it's not genuinely really ugly for what it is, because I mean, it is. I should know. Takes one to know one.
Ooh, self-burn. Those are rare.
Not on this channel, they're not. And the number 8 car on the list is the Mercedes CLK GTR. Again, another supercar, basically road-going race car icon of the 90s. But have you looked at it recently? The overall design of the car looks like a homologated 90s race car because it pretty much is. But again, it's the Bugatti EB110 problem of the overall shape and silhouette. The design of the car as a whole is not that bad. But then what they did to finish the design of the car is... It's like they just took their freaking regular Mercedes E-Class sedan front end and slapped it on the front of a supercar, and that doesn't work. It does not work at all. I get that they had like a corporate design that they were trying to incorporate into the supercar, but they could have done it so much better than they did. I don't think this is the ugliest one on the list, but it's just so strange that was the decision that they made. Because if you look at a modern day example of a similar idea with being like the Mercedes AMG 1 supercar, it looks like a Mercedes. It's not your normal looking supercar. It definitely has Mercedes design elements to it, but they didn't just take like a C-Class front end and just slap it on the front of it. It is a purpose-built design, and considering the CLK GTR was a purpose-built supercar race car thing, why did it just have like a regular Mercedes front end on it? It will always baffle me. It was just such a goofy decision, still a cool car. We'll just move on. And number 9 on this list genuinely hurts me because this is such a cool car, but it just is kind of weird looking, is the McLaren Speedtail. And that might make a lot of people angry because I get that the overall design of it is what makes it cool and fast. The really awkwardly long rear end aids in the aerodynamics that make the car capable of going past 250 miles per hour. The weird front wheels with the, why can I not remember what they're called? Turbofan? I guess that's what it's called on the, I know that that's what it's called on like other designs of wheels. If there's a word for that that I'm just absolutely forgetting and I can't remember it by the time I'm editing this video, please let me know in the comments what the word that I'm looking for is. But that weird, goofy, aerodynamic cover on the front wheels that is on the Speedtail, it's just, it's so weird. And it's cool that they decided to kind of make a modern interpretation of the McLaren F1, but in a lot of ways, this is not just commenting on the aesthetics. I don't know if it quite accomplished that. It's still a really cool car and a really unique design, but just, I get the vibe when looking at it that it looks like a 720S that's covered in a sheet pretending to be a ghost. Does that make sense? Just tell me that that's not true, okay? Because I feel like that is a very accurate description of this car. And the 720S is a fantastic car, and I think it is an absolutely gorgeous supercar. I got to sit in one time. It was one of the highlights of my entire life. I don't know about that, but it was really cool, and I love the 720S, but the Speedtail, it just, I don't know, man, it's so weird. I don't know if it's necessarily super ugly, it's just so strange. But we have to get to the number 10 option on this list, which very well might be the most ugly by far. And you might be thinking, hey, Colton, there's been no Ferraris on this list so far. And I have no love for Ferrari corporate. I hate the company as the company, but they have made some beautiful cars in the past, and it is still a life goal of mine to own a Ferrari at some point, just because it's a Ferrari, and I love a lot of their older cars. I love a lot of their new cars, and I think they've made a lot of striking, beautiful cars. And honestly, I couldn't think of any off the top of my head that I thought were genuinely ugly, except for one. Sure, there's some that people are not as much of a fan of, like the 360 Modena, which I get. I personally think that it's a nice looking car. I get that it's a very tame looking car, sure. The 456, people think it's just kind of lame looking. I guess to an extent, but it's definitely not ugly by any means. It's just a decent looking car. Still, more people think that like the 348 is ugly, which is funny because personally, I think I like how the 348 looks even more than like the 355, which everyone seems to love. Regardless, there is one Ferrari historically that I think is, when it comes to the supercar side of things, because remember, this is supercars. We're not talking about GT cars or SUVs or sedans or whatever. Not that Ferrari has really gone into the SUV or sedan market that much outside of the Parasangue, which that is ugly, not a supercar. We're gonna gloss on past that. There is one Ferrari historically, which is absolutely hideous. It looks like a boat design went wrong, so they slapped wheels on it. It looks like it's masking extreme anxiety with a fake smile. Okay, it's the Ferrari F90, the Sultan of Brunei car that they only made a handful of specifically for the Sultan of Brunei under his design influence. Well, I gotta say, he doesn't have the greatest taste apparently, because oof. Honestly, one of, if not the biggest car collection of all time, the Sultan of Brunei has hundreds and thousands of supercars as well as other things. The Ferrari F90, well, it's no. I don't understand how this happened, but somehow it looks like it's wearing a scarf, which I don't think is a design feature most people look for in a supercar. I could be wrong, I'm not the average supercar buyer. I have a Focus and a Mustang and a Dakota, which you could argue none of those are supercars. And it's so weird because the front end of the car, there is an angle, like a 3/4 front end shot, where it almost captures like the classic Ferrari racers of the 60s, like the P3 and P4. It almost has that sort of design to it. But then you look at it straight on and you're like, why is it looking at me like that? Whoa, I don't want any trouble. I'm gonna leave. Please, just don't follow me. Don't follow me, please! It's so bad. It's so ugly. And because it was only ever sold to and designed for the Sultan of Brunei, there's not like a wealth of information or pictures of these cars around, and it's so strange. I was gonna say I don't know how to feel, but I do. I hate it. Like, I don't want anything bad to happen to it, but if I found it talking to my kids, I would definitely be upset. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. As of filming today, we only have 1 sub left to reach our goal of hitting 1,000 by the end of this year. So obviously we're gonna make it. So thank you guys so much for the support. And if you enjoyed this video, even more so, please consider liking the video as well. And I will see you guys all in the next one.